What's up, guys? Welcome back to Silver State Garage. Today we are going to be replacing an exhaust manifold on a 2001 Mitsubishi Galant. Alright, now here's a list of the required tools. Everything here is just basic stuff you should have already. Do not forget to have the penetrating oil, whether it be WD-40, PB Blast, or something like that. The ramps are optional. You can jack the vehicle up and put it on jack stands. That's not required to put it on ramps. I just have some, and I find it a hell of a lot easier than crawling underneath and jacking it up.
Alright, so to start here, we've got four 12mm bolts on the heat shield, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the O2 sensor there. The heat shield bolts are 12mm. My O2 sensor was 7/8. You can use an actual O2 sensor socket for that, but I don't have one, so I made do. And then after that, you come over here, follow your wire around for your O2 sensor. It's on a couple clips down there. It comes back up. You can just pull this and it'll come off. I might need two hands, but anyway, there it is. Now we're going to spray these bolts with penetrating oil. So you've got 4 here on top and then 5 right underneath. They're kind of 4 here, and then the 5 are offset to the right a little bit, and there's 3 underneath. Let me grab a new one here for reference. So you got your 4 there on top, 5 down there on the bottom, and then down there where it meets up underneath the engine, let's see if I can turn this right, you got those 3. Alright, after you've given them all a nice bath, I would let it sit for a day, maybe apply it twice in one day, maybe come back the next day, do it 2 more times. This car's got 183,000 miles, and I know these are going to be a pain in the ass, so I'm trying to get ahead of the curve a little bit and make this a little easier on myself. These top ones probably aren't so bad, but the ones underneath, down there, can't really get a light in there to show you, but those are more exposed to road salts and rain and all that kind of stuff, so they're going to be a little bit more rusty and a bit more hard to get out. Just don't be shy with using that penetrating oil. It'll make your life a lot easier. All right, so these are the 3 down underneath. The 2 here on the outside of the flange are both 19mm, and that one right there is a 14. Same situation for these 3 as I had with the top. They weren't that hard to break. I figured these were going to be a major pain in the ass, but they weren't. I'm going to go ahead and give a big shout out to PB Blaster here, because I'm sure they'd be really hard to get it without them. Anyway, I'd recommend doing these 3 first before you do the ones up there on the head, only because you don't want the manifold to drop away and get a bunch of crap if you have anything up there. You don't want to get a bunch of crap inside the exhaust ports. So do these 3 first. Just bear in mind that as you take the bolts off, the pipe's going to want to drop down. It's not going to go real far, but just be aware that it might. So do these 3 and then go up to the head and get those 9. Now this one down here, this tab there is in the way. You probably can't see it on camera, but this one on here, bottom row, second from right. You can get to it with a ratchet, but you need to run an extension, something like that, to get your ratchet out past this. This one here is a 14mm, and the one over here, of course, in a shadow right now, that one's also a 14mm. Just keep that in mind. These 4, all 12 on top. The 3 underneath in the middle are 12s, and then you got a 14 there and a 14 here. All right, so this one, let's see, the bottom row, second from the left, I'm using a socket and then a universal joint and then an extension, and I got the ratchet. It's at this weird cocked sideways angle, but there's really no other way to get to it. So there's something here that I didn't show, and I apologize for that. I just kind of got in the flow of working and I just forgot to show it. But there's a heat shield that sits kind of like kind of like right here. The lower bolt or the lower nut attaches here, and then there's a bolt that goes into the head right there. There's really not much of a way to get to the nut on this one without taking off the power steering pump and the bracket and all that, and I didn't feel like doing that. I figured there should have been a better way. So I took this one off up here, which, like everything else, was a 12 millimeter, and I was able to kind of work it back and forth a little bit, just enough to get it to come high enough, just a little, where I could get my my wrench down here to get this one off. It was a pain in the ass, and I think the only way I'm going to be able to torque it is if I use a beam torque wrench, which I don't have, so I'm going to have to go buy one of those. But anyway, just something to keep in mind. You either have to take off the power steering pump and the bracket, which let's see if I can find it here, which is, there's a bolt there and there's a bolt there. This whole thing right here will come off, so you should be able to undo those and swing this out, but that would require you to take off the belt and all that, which again is fine, but I didn't feel like doing it. So like I said, really what I did was I just undid the top one, worked the shield back and forth a little bit. In fact, since it was so much of a pain in the ass, I may not even put it back on. I don't really know. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that since I didn't show taking it off. All right, so now that you have all your hardware off, go ahead and slide the manifold off the studs. This part's pretty easy. It was impossible to do it one-handed, but just slide it off the studs, lift it, get it out of here. When you're done with that, go ahead and clean off your mounting surface here. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're not trying to eat off it. Just brake cleaner and a rag will be fine. You can see a little bit closer there. There's a bunch of that grease and grime and PB Blaster residue, just a bunch of shit that's left on there from all the miles that this car's been driven. So get all of it cleaned up and prepped for install. Installation here, pretty simple. Once you get the surface clean, slide your gasket on the studs and then put the manifold on. Get all the hardware on. Make sure you do it evenly, just like you would with your lug nuts on a car. Kind of back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, get it all done. The 14 millimeter bolts here and down there in the corner, those are 36 pounds. Torque spec is 36 pounds. And the other 12 millimeters here on top and down here on the bottom row, those are 22. I'll leave a screenshot of the FSM there and here in the end of the video. So down here at the bottom, this manifold that I bought did not come with any extra hardware. I kind of figured it would, but like most shade tree mechanics like myself, I hope a lot of you guys keep extra hardware on hand just in case. These, I don't know the thread pitch, but the head of the bolts are 15 mil, so these will be fine. You don't need to put a washer on the, or a nut on the back, just because the manifold itself has threads on it. So snug them down, and that's basically it for here.
All right, so those two bolts there on the flange, those are both torqued down to 26 pounds. Couldn't find anything on that third one, but it's really only there to tie the manifold to the exhaust pipe by way of the engine block. Think of it as just another exhaust hanger. Now, the new manifold doesn't come with any new hardware, so I had to dig through my bucket of bolts and find something that worked. So you might have to do the same. All right, once you get the manifold on and torqued down, we're going to go ahead and make sure we put our O2 sensor back in. I went with a new one this time around since the other one was pretty fouled up. I got a Denso, let's see, 234-4738. I forget the exact price that I paid for it on Rock Auto, but it was like 20-25 bucks cheaper than the parts house. Anyway, the instructions here say to put a little dab of anti-seize, which they include some here, so that's nice of them. Get it on there, then torque it down. I wrote down here 122 inch-pounds. This is not on this instruction sheet. I did find this from the FSM though. So I won't be showing this since it's hard to do with one hand on the camera.
but I'll do that now and then come back and show you the finished product. Thought I would take an opportunity here to show how much I put on. I probably even put a little bit too much, but you don't really need to put a whole lot, just enough to cover the threads once it threads in, of course. Now be careful to not get it on the sensor itself. Just keep it on the threaded part. It's only, I don't know, maybe a 1/4 inch at most, so just be careful. You could probably use a flat bladed screwdriver or something like that to have a little bit more control. Of course, I didn't do that. I always think retrospectively. So yeah, just be careful.
All right, now right here is a screenshot of the FSM. It's got torque specs and locations of everything on it. While I am talking, I would like to mention that I did not put that heat shield back on, the one that was there on the left side of the manifold. I know Mitsubishi put it on there for a reason. I understand that. I just didn't put it back on. It was too much of a pain in the ass to line everything back up. So, of course, do this at your own risk, but you could probably get away with just cutting it off and getting to the bolts. There's really no other way to do it. On that note, I also put that 12mm bolt back in the head. I didn't really feel like it was necessary to just leave a hole there.
Okay, so the sensor's in. Now you can see here that the factory heat shield has a little tab there. You can put the wire in to help route it, but these holes here, they don't accept the bolts, the factory bolts for the heat shield. And of all the bolts that I have, of course, I don't have those ones. So I'm going to say to hell with it and run no heat shield, at least for now. I'll track down the bolts later, but for now it's not really much of a priority for me. On that note, I will show you where I routed them in case you have this problem. Come down here, make sure it's got plenty of slack here. Okay, you don't want it routed tight. Zip tie it. Let's see if I can get the camera there. Zip tie it there. Follow it behind. There's a little tab right there on the bottom of the water neck. Go behind that. I don't know if the camera's gonna pick it up or not. Let's see. Yeah, so you go behind that tab, between the cylinder head and the radiator hose. Go between there, and then up to the connector. So just make sure they're connected, secured. So I made sure this zip tie was kind of tight, not super tight, of course, but kind of tight. I don't want this moving too much. And then this one right here, I made sure I put a little bit looser just for engine vibrations and anything like that. I want to make sure it could have an opportunity to wiggle around if it needs to. That's it. That's honestly it. This project was a hell of a lot easier than I expected it to be. I mentioned earlier, at least I think I did, that the car's got like 183,000 miles, and I just figured these nuts would be an absolute pain in the ass to get off, especially the ones down there at the bottom that connect to the rest of the exhaust system. But honestly, nothing was too bad. Everything came off pretty easily and went back on pretty easily. Yeah. Now it's time for a beer. Till next time.